Tonight's Zera Shimshon Shir is sponsored by Moshe Mordechai ben David Pinchas HaKoyen. It should be a schus for him and his wife Tzahala, Bez Hashem to see a mashpacha, Bunim, uvnei Bunim, oiskim b'Torah b'mitzvahs. Rabbi Shimshon Chaim ben Rab Nachman Mechol Nachmeni Zechusa Yogin Aleini. Everybody who learns his sefer, this week was his yard site, and we are all considered like his kinderlach. Yishinantam Livanecha, we're his children. And if we're his children, he's our tati. And if he's our tati, then he's going to help us out, Bais Hashem. This week, we're going to learn Parshas Ki Seitzei. This week's Parsha, letter Zayin, which is page Shin Samach Bais. We're going to learn about the qualities of being Am Yisrael, being a Yid. Who's allowed into Klal Yisrael? Who's allowed into what's called Kahal Yisrael? This week's Torah portion says, I'm going to read some of the background from the Chumash. Lo yovi ptsuadaka v'krus shivcha b'kahal Hashem. A krus shivcha ptsuadaka should not be part of Kahal Hashem. Lo yovi mamzer b'kahal Hashem. Gam dorasiri lo yovi b'kahal Hashem. Lo yovi amoini ma'ovi b'kahal Hashem. Gam dorasiri lo yovi b'kahal Hashem ad oilam. The words of the Torah are very interesting. It's different. B'kahal Hashem. B'kahal Hashem literally the word kahal means a congregation. The congregation of Hashem. Is the Torah telling us we're not supposed to accept converts from Amoini Amayavi? Is that what it's saying? No. They can convert and they can become Jewish. But Judaism has two different tiers. There's Klal Yisrael, and then there's called Kahal Hashem. Blue-blooded, if we want to use that terminology, blue-blooded Jews that are called Kahal Hashem, which means, let's talk about a mamzer for a minute. Is a mamzer Jewish? 100%. Tata is a mother's Jewish, but she lived with somebody she wasn't supposed to. The child's a mamzer. He has to put on tefillin, if it's a boy, bris milah, he's a yid. But the Torah Kedosha said, Lo yovei b'kahal Hashem. What does that mean? That means that Klal Yisrael has different tiers. You can get an aliyah? Yeah, you can get an aliyah. Kahal Hashem is a status of purity within Klal Yisrael. A person who's a Mitzri was an Egyptian who converted to Judaism. Dor Shlishi Yavai B'Kahal Hashem. Dor Shlishi means if the father converted, his child is called a Dor Sheni. His anical, his grandchild is Dor Shlishi. That generation can marry any Jew no matter what. Tati can't, Zaidi can't, the father, the child can't, the anical could. Why? Because the Torah says, Dor Shlishi Yavai B'Kahal Hashem. And the same is true with the offspring of Esav, the Adoimis. The Torah Kedosha says, Bunim asher yevoldu lehem Dor Shlishi Yavai lehem B'Kahal Hashem. So the first thing that we're establishing tonight is that within Klal Yisrael you could become Jewish, and you're a Jew, me'achuz, you get an aliyah, 100% Jewish. However, there is another status that the Torah Kedosha calls, it's called Kahal Hashem. What does it take to be in Kahal Hashem? A person cannot have any blemishes with their lineage. So, a regular convert, you're in Kahal Hashem. A regular convert could be part of Kal Hashem. But if they come from certain nations, then depending on which nation you come from, you might not be able to get into Kahal Hashem right away. It might take a little time, like a Mitzri or an Adoimi, 3 generations. Regarding Amaynu Moyav, regarding those who are our cousins, you know why they're our cousins? Because they're Lot's children. Lot was Avram's nephew. Amaynu Moyav. They, the Torah Kedoshi says, Lo Yove Amaynu Moavi Bekal Hashem, Gam Dor Asiri, even if it's 10 generations, Lo Yove Lehem Bekal Hashem, Ad Oilam. Never. Fragt Eliezer, Vosim et Rus. That was the debate. That was the debate in the times of the Shoftim of Boyaz, where Klal Yisrael's echelon debated whether Rus, she'll be a convert. Gesunte Heit. She converts to Judaism. She's Jewish. But to marry Boyaz, is she allowed to do that? That he's Kahal Hashem. He's a regular Yid. Boyaz and his Bezdin paskind, Amoini v'loy amoinis, Moavi v'loy moavis. And that's our discussion tonight. And that's our shir. The men were kicked out, the women not. In Mitzri v'adoimi, the Gemara doesn't make such a distinction. The Gemara discusses it. Let's say Mitzri v'loy mitzris, let's say adoimi v'loy adoimis. The Gemara has such a conversation. It's the Gemara in Yevamis, Daf Ayin Vav, Daf Ayin Zayin. That's where the Gemara discusses it, the halachas of lineage. But the Gemara's maskana is there's no difference between the Ammon and the Moya, the Mitzri and the Adoimi with men and women. Only by Ammon and Moav. The fellows, the guys, the Gvarim, out forever. The women in immediately, right away.
The child of Shlomo's Bas Divri was not allowed into the Shevet Dan, right? For that reason?
That was because he wasn't part of Dan. She was from Dan, but his father was a Mitzri, not because he was a Mitzri Scheiner. He was also a mamzer too, right? Because she was married to somebody else. Correct, very good. But because he wasn't part of Shevet Dan, so he had no right to put his tent there. Zug the Heilige Zera Shimshon. Al dvar asher lo kidmu eschem belechem ubemayim. We're learning Zayin, Shin Samach Bais. So one more time, the Torah Kedosha writes, Amoini lo yovi amoini umavi bekal Hashem dama sari ad oilam. And here it gives a reason. I'm going to read for you what it says in the Chumash. Al devar, because of the words, asher lekidmu eschem, or the thing, the asek, the inyan, asher lekidmu eschem belechem ubemayim. They didn't offer you lechem and mayim. They didn't come out to greet Klal Yisrael with bread and water. B'derech b'tzeischem b'mitzrayim. When Klal Yisrael left Egypt, they should have been greeted by Ammon and Moav to welcome them and to support them. They turned, in Yiddish we say, Zam sich nicht wissendig gemacht, which means they totally ignored Klal Yisrael. They made themselves like they don't, I don't know, they made themselves nish wissendig. Nothing. That's one. V'asher sochar alecha es bilam ben ba'ar mipsar amnaraim lekalelcha. And they hired this mercenary, Bilam, to go ahead and curse Klal Yisrael. For those two things, they're layavai. That's the reason. Hashem didn't listen to Bilam because he loves us. Therefore, don't say shalom to them, stay away. As I state in the Torah. Says the Zera Shimshon. Pirish Rashi, al devar al ha'etza sheyatzu eschem lahachti achem. He gave you an eitzah. They gave an eitzah, ala eitzah sheyasu, the Klal Yisrael sinned, unfortunately, with Bnei Moav. Remember, Rabbi say 24,000 Jews died. Out of the 600,000, it could have been much, much worse if not for Pinchas's intervention. But Lamaisa, Klal Yisrael suffered, and it was because of an Eitzah to be Machshel Klal Yisrael. As I state in Rashi, on the words Al Devar Asher Lo Kidmu, Rashi inserts Nochatam, another reason. The Torah writes the reason because like Kidmu Lachem Belechem Ubemayim, because they didn't come out to greet you. And the Rashi adds another reason because they were machtia you. Says the Zera Shimshon, Hikshu asks the Kli Yoker, Hikshu al the obvious question is, why does Rashi have to give a different reason if the pasuk gives one reason? If the Chumash says because of lechem u'mayim, because of bilam, why is Rashi giving in eitzes about being chaytu machte? That's the first question. The Rashi medayik milos al devar. Devar means, it could have said al asher. So because it says devar, he saw an extra word in the pasuk. Because he saw an extra word in the pasuk, he dashed devar because of the eitzah. But as the Zera Shimshon knew, so now there's an extra. But what do I need it for? If the Torah gives one reason, the Torah says asher lekidmu lechem belechem b'mayim, and you're telling me because of the eitzahs that they give. So there is an extra word in the pasuk. Is vosi ve'im kol zeh ledidan kashetuva shari ashi atzmai kosav Samach, Shatam Shenesavu Amanu Moav. The reason Amanu Moav was sent away and became an abomination was because Shehichtiu es Yisrael Shamachti LaAdam Koshelai Min HaHargai. Causing a person to sin is like worse than even killing him. You're making him sin spiritually. V'lama Pirish Ikar Atam. Why does Rashi need extra reasons? V'nokatam She'ena Ikar. And according to Rashi, if the real reason is because you were chayta u'machte, because you made them sin, so what's the lechem and mayim? And by the way, just let's already ask this, in vusis azoi geferlich, and why is it so terrible that they don't come out with lechem and mayim, that's the reason? Why is that so terrible? So you didn't come and approach them. Says the Zera Shimshon, let's learn a grace yisoid. V'yesh loymar, have a cost of tam shel amachti es ha'odam. If the reason was machti es ha'odam, if that would have been written, then who was machti them? Who was it? The ladies, the girls, right? They seduced the Jewish people and then brought them to do avodah zarah. If the Torah would have talked about that, how in the world could you say amoyni v'loy amoynis? How could you say that they don't have blood on their hands, that they're not guilty, if they're the ones who are machti the Klal Yisrael? Zokter loy hayev shloy ma'amoyni v'loy amoynis u'ma'avi v'loy ma'avis shari be'emes iker achet bo machmas hanoshim. It was the women who lamaisa caused Klal Yisrael to fall. Ella, so how come the Torah is not writing that reason? If that's the ikar reason, A, why isn't it writing it? B, how come we're allowed to marry? How come Rus was allowed in? The teretz is, and what is the second reason? Listen to the lumdus. The teretz is, Ella kosav tamashalei kidmu. Shigam sham yesh lahakshas hoylem lahakdem anoshim. So the kidmu. Why are the women off the hook? Why is it only the men? Why not the women? The teretz says the Gemara. The Gemara says because the men were the ones in charge. The men, Chazal say, kol kvoida bas melech penima. Once upon a time, I'm not talking now. Rednish hitstert. Once upon a time, the world had a different perspective about what the definition of tznius is. Tznius is not whether your clothes are to the elbow or you're over your knee. Many ladies, Baruch Hashem, are extremely tzniustic, wonderful. But tznius also has to do with a way of life, of being careful about what one says, not just shooting text or spreading information. Tznius is a way of life. It's not a way of how one dresses. And kol kvoida bas melech pnima, there was a certain majesty, not just by the girls, by the boys, by ganz Klal Yisrael, but certainly by the women, of having a certain tzniistigkeit. Kol kvoida bas melech pnima. Therefore, umemelo anu lomdim shema sheyoytza lahachti es Yisrael ein lem shum oynish shari anusas hoya ma'aviyam. This is a very important point. Let's make it very clear. We'll translate. The Torah Kedosha says the main reason is because asher lekidmu lachem belechem ubemayim. But Rashi says that's not the main reason. It's chayto machta. So why are we doing the switch? The teretz is to bring out a major point. In asher kidmu lachem lechem umayim, why was it that Klal Yisrael, why was it that Ammon and Moav were held accountable? Because where were the guys, where were they to bring and accommodate Klal Yisrael? Where were they to go ahead and accept Klal Yisrael, to make Klal Yisrael feel good? We had that taina against the men, not against the women, because darka shal isha lotzeis v'loy darka shal isha lotzeis. That taina was on the men, not on the women. Says the Zera Shimshon, just like you see that the men were able to stop the women, or it was not appropriate for women to go out, and that's why there was no taina on them, why they didn't go ahead and give other women food. So when they did go out, you have to know that the control was by the man, and they were being honest to go out. They weren't calling the shots. So although Einochinami, it was because of the women, but it was not because of them, it was through the women, because of the men. Meaning they were the ones calling the shots, they were the one in control, and they're the ones who were Machte Klal Yisrael, and they're the ones Ashalai Kadmu. Upirish akosiv kachu. So now let's explain the pasuk. Shelafia emes ikra tam shenis avu Ammon and Moav hu alachet shechtiyam. Indeed, Klal Yisrael doesn't want to have to do with Ammon and Moav because of the sin and the way they made Klal Yisrael be choyte, and the way they bamish caused death to 24,000 Yidden. Avoloi ala maisachet mamish. It wasn't on the maisachet, because the maisachet women were also involved. It was the diabolical plan that they're mechuyev. El ala eitza v'hahechrach sha'ansu aves as b'noiseyam. It was the fathers forcing their girls to go out and do this sin and convincing them. It's like lahavdil, or maybe it isn't even lahavdil, when the Arabs, when the muftis get up and rile up a crowd and convince them and get the crowd to a state of rage, and then those people go out and carry out what the Baal Ha'etzah taught them, and what he riled them up. So he is the one with power. He's the one. In this case, the avos of those girls are the ones who are being machti, the girls. So even though the chet happened through the girls, but we says the Torah Kedosh al devar, who was the dabron, who was the leader, who was the mover, who made it happen? They did. V'zeu al devar. V'afilu hochi im hoya lehem haschus lias maktim belechem ubemayim. Yet, if there would be maktim belechem ubemayim, hoyin nisaklim ktsas. Mishum damrino perak aleph the Sanhedrin. Amrinon gedoyle legima shemekareves rechayim. You give someone to eat. You're mekarev rechayim ma'alemes ayim and rashayim. Aval achshu shaloi kidnu nisavu. So now that they didn't do it, they're considered disgusted. The Ramban on the Parsha asks, what was such a terrible thing? Shalai kidmu belechem ubemayim. Vus is azay shver. And he even asked them, Mefarshim say, didn't at the end of 40 years they did give them? When they came out of Mitzrayim, they didn't give them. They give them later. So what's so terrible? Listen to the Lashon Ramban, and let's learn the lesson of Ammon and Moav. Says the Ramban, Hakaras HaToiv is one of the foundations of good midos. Understanding that when someone does something for you, that you have to have an appreciation, that a person has to truly and honestly recognize when someone has done you a favor and show hakaras hatoiv. This program that they're going to be sending out, Be'ezus Hashem, in the next few weeks here, is going to be an opportunity for all of us here who come to daven and learn to show hakaras hatoiv to 18 Forshay, 20 Forshay, Chaim, and personally even to Zera Scheiner for all that he does. It's hakaras hatoiv opportunity that's coming up, Be'ezus Hashem. Hakaras hatoiv is the foundation of the nation. Listen to what the Ramban says. V'nira elai ki yarchid shnei ha'achim ha'ela. These two brothers, Ammon and Moav, these two brothers, the sons, the grandsons of Lot and the sons of Lot be'etzem. Lot's daughters, who gave the names Ammon and Moav. The Avram Avinu, Shahoya Goimle Gemule Chesed Ma'Avraham. They had so much to be thankful from Avram Avinu. Shehitzel Avihem ve'imam min hacherev u'min hashevi. He saved their parents, their father and their mothers, from cherev, from being killed and from being captured. When they were captured, when Lot was captured by the Malachim, the 4 against 5, who went to war and who risked his life for Lot? Avram Avinu. Ubischusai, and then Nishnardem. Ubischusai sholcham Hashem mitoich hafeicha. And when Sodom was being turned over, who saved him again? Avram Avinu. Multiple times Avram Avinu stuck his neck out, and Lot wouldn't be there if not for Avram. Lot's daughters wouldn't be there if not for Avram, and Ammon and Moav wouldn't be there if not for Avram Avinu. So for heaven's sakes, now Klal Yisrael, the children of Avram Avinu, are coming out of Mitzrayim. Lo tzarich lagid todah. You don't have to say thank you. You don't have to go out and say, let me do something to show a little bit of hakaras hatoiv. V'hoyu chayovim lasois toivim Yisrael. They should have done good. They're mechuyev. Any decent, moral human being would feel responsible. We got to show our hakaras hatoiv. We need to show that I appreciate what you did. And nishnardeim v'heim osu imoem ra. Not nishnardeim, they did evil. Ha'echad tzachas Bilam ben Pa'or. One of them, the Moav, went and hired Bilam to curse them. Va'echad like kodem and lechem u'mayim asher koyev l'muloi. As Klal Yisrael came close, they turned around and nishkavach misvisendik. That's who you are. You can have nothing to do with our nation. Klal Yisrael is rachmanim, baishanim, goyim lechasodim. Klal Yisrael are the children of Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov. Children of Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, who each of them was able to conquer their Yetzer Hara, and they were able to have good Rachmanim like Yaakov, Goyim Chasodim like Avraham, Baishanim from Yitzchak. Each midah, the Maral says, is a direct, it's in our DNA. How can you mish Kahal Hashem with such people? In their DNA, they're missing something that they're not compatible. Like you do Dor Yesharim, you do Dor Yesharim to make sure you have Doiros Yesharim Umevayrach. Those Amoinim and Moavim don't have Doiros Yesharim. And if they don't have Doiros Yesharim, they can't be part of Kahal Hashem. The Torah Kedosha said, Al Dvar Shalai Kidmu, it was the men's responsibility. The women were not given that opportunity. They stayed at home. So the women were not held accountable for this. Memel, there's no taina on them. So it's only a taina on the men and not taina on the women. And therefore, Amoinis and Rus was able to become immediately part of Klal Yisrael, and that's why she was in. But it teaches us Rabbi Sai. It teaches us very clearly the attitude that we Yidden have to have and understand. Rabbi Sai. Everybody, one way or another, gets insulted and hurt from another Yid. No one's perfect. We all make mistakes. We all make mistakes. But to hold a grudge for weeks and months and years and not to talk to somebody for years because it's broigus, that's not something Jewish. It's not Jewish. It's not Jewish. Al tisna es achicha bilvavecha. If a person can hold a grudge against another Jew, even if the other person is wrong and has wronged you, but it isn't right to continuously bear and be angry at that person, that's not Yiddish. That you've been influenced by the Goyish world around us. It's not the Yetzer Tov that it's coming from. There's deep down, Ritzaynenu lasais ritzaynecha. Any Yid, in this week's Parsha, again and again it says, when you see a lost object of achicha, when you see this thing, loisiris chamar achicha, your brother, when you see something which belongs kol avedas achicha, the Torah Kedusha says your brother, your brother, your brother. You know, those are the midas of Kahal Hashem. That's called Kahal Hashem, a congregation of the Rabbeinu Shalom, where even if somebody does something wrong to us, we're willing to say, let's move on, let's be Mavater, let's be the bigger one. Reb Shloime Volba, Zechreinu Levracha, the Baal, the Mechaber of Alei Shor, once in Mir Yeshiva said, when two people are fighting and one person gives in, he said in Yiddish, the Geresere Biktzach. The bigger person bends down. Val de Klenere Kenisht. Because the small person can't. The Geresere Biktzach Val de Klenere Kenisht. The big one is the one who says, I'm sorry, who lowers themselves. Because the smaller person is not big enough to be able to bend. You have to be big to be able to say, I'm sorry. You have to be big to be able to say, I don't want to fight anymore. That's the message of Kahal Hashem. Zayin HaChelik of Kahal Hashem. That's the Vayichkeit. That's the softness, which is Rachmonim, Baishonim, Goim Chasodim. That's our DNA. That's what makes up a Yiddish nation. And that's why we talk about other Jews, this week's Parsha, in the terms of Achicha. They're your brother. A brother has lost something. A brother needs something. It's not just another Jew. It's an Ach. It's a brother to the person. So therefore, Adarabah, when nations of the world become Yiddish, but they can't exhibit that kind of brotherly connection. They can't have that midah toiva of Rachmanim, Baishonim, Goim Chasodim, lo yavai bekal Hashem. They could be Jewish. They could be part of Klal Yisrael, but they can't be part of Kahal Hashem. They can't be part of the nation. This is our Avodah Meirav Rabbi Sai. Every single year during the Zman of Elul is to awaken the Kahal Hashem within us. To recognize that mistakes that we've made throughout the year have made us lose our own identity, have made us lose and forget what it means to be a Yid, to be able to become so angry to be able to become in such a machloikis, and therefore not talk to other Jews, not talk to family members, not talk to kinderlach not talking to parents, cholila, that's not Jewish. That's not Jewish. So how does it happen? It happens because of the influence of the goyim and the sviva that's around us. That's part of what's called the leiv ha'even. It's a hard stone that becomes, a person's heart becomes hard. This zman is a zman umol Hashem elekecha es levavcha ve'es levav zarecha. It's a time that HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes up like a bris milah. Orlas halev means fashed up. Orla is the name of a goy, an orel, a foreskin, the orel. Orlas halev means that Klal Yisrael can unfortunately get to a darga where they're so fashed up, they're so stuffed up that they can't have the regesh, where they feel what deep in their hearts they should be feeling. And they lose the sensitivity, become desensitized. Elul is a zman of umol Hashem elekecha es levavcha ve'es levav. It's a zman that we can rip away that orlas halev so that we should be able to feel what a Jew really feels, which is achenu kol Bais Yisrael, that we're all brothers. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects from us. This is the definition which what we started tonight, which is called Kahal Hashem, a congregation where HaKadosh Baruch Hu is identified with that nation. That nation is Rachmanim, Baishanim, Goyim Lechasodim. That nation is a nation that has full of good within them and dispenses and is only doing good. Memela, that has to stay pure. Lo yovei mamzer b'kahal Hashem. Lo yovei amayni ma'avi b'kahal Hashem. Why? Bad midos. Lo kidmu lachem belechem u'b'mayim. Not willing to have the common decency of having the akaras atoid that you're Zeda Avram Avinu. If not for him, you wouldn't be around, and you can't do anything for their kids. You can't be a part of the Kahal Hashem. But in Shem Zolon's help and Be'ezras Hashem, we should be Zoicha to feel the Kahal Hashem inside every single one of us. It's there. It's natural. The fact that we don't feel it maybe is because we're covered up with layers of we're being desensitized to the Kedusha of Klal Yisrael. So mezoiches ein be'ezras Hashem Yisbarach, that the Elul should be a richtige Elul, a good Elul, umol Hashem elekecha, es levavcha ve'es levav zarecha.